Welcome to the second week of Machine Learning module. Today we will talk about machine learning basics. The lecture is split into 4 parts. In the first part, we will talk about the basic machine learning concepts, such as supervised or unsupervised learning. In the second and third part, we will learn how to use Python libraries to solve machine learning problems, in particular scikit-learn. And in the final part, we will learn how to train machine learning models and how to evaluate them. So, what is machine learning? Unlike traditional programming, machine learning algorithms are programmed to learn patterns from the training data. And each example in the training dataset is called a sample. Let's take an example of learning healthy fetal growth. So for that, we can use ultrasound imaging, and for each baby, we will record gestational age and head circumference. And then machine learning task is to predict normal head circumference from gestational age. Each sample is characterized by one or more features, and these can be gestational age of a baby, measurements of heart function, or pixel intensities, or many other possibilities. Then the machine learning task is to predict some outputs from these features. And these outputs might be known for each training sample, and then we talk about supervised learning. An example can be diagnosis of heart failure. So we record measurements of heart function for healthy volunteers as well as patients with heart failure. And then we train the machine learning algorithm to predict heart failure from these measurements. In some other cases, outputs for training samples are not known, and then we talk about unsupervised learning. Example of an unsupervised machine learning task is segmentation, where we find groups of pixels with similar intensity values to segment the image. Now, let's test your knowledge. Is prediction of head circumference from gestational age of the fetus a supervised or an unsupervised task? Correct answer is supervised because measurements of head circumference are known for each sample. Let's have a closer look at supervised learning. A regression is a type of supervised machine learning task where the outputs are continuous, and the continuous outputs are called target values. An example of a regression task is a prediction of brain volumes of preterm babies from their age. So these volumes can be accurately calculated from MRI images. And in this example, the feature is a gestational age or age of the baby that we plot on the x-axis. And the target value is the brain volume calculated from the segmented MRI that we have here on the y-axis. And you can see that we have fitted a linear regression model to this data. A different type of supervised machine learning task is classification, and here the outputs are discrete. And the discrete outputs are called labels. We have already seen an example of classification, which is prediction of heart failure from ultrasound or MRI measurements of heart function. So examples of such useful measurements are ejection fraction and global longitudinal strain. And both of these are the features in this example. So you see first feature ejection fraction on x-axis and global longitudinal strain or on y-axis. And here you can see the decision boundary between the two groups of patients, which are the healthy patients in blue and heart failure patients in red. So label in this case will tell us whether the patient is healthy or has heart failure. In this module, we will cover several supervised methods. So you already are familiar with linear and polynomial regression. We will also look at ridge, lasso, and kernel ridge regression. And for classification, we will look at perceptron, logistic regression, support vector classifier. Some machine learning methods can be both regression or classification, and these are random forest and neural network. Now let's have a closer look at unsupervised learning. One type of unsupervised learning method is clustering, where we group samples with similar feature vectors into clusters. So we have, again, already seen an example of clustering, which is segmentation. And in this example here, we segment brain MRI, and we have two MR channels, T1 weighted image and T2 weighted image. And features are T1 weighted and T2 weighted intensities of the voxels. And in this plot, we have plotted T1 weighted intensity on the x-axis and T2 weighted intensity on y-axis. And note that we do not have any labels in training. However, the clustering algorithm predicts the labels, and it identifies the clusters. So you can see here three clusters, one for cerebrospinal fluid, one for gray matter, and one for white matter. So a clustering algorithm is able to identify these three main clusters that correspond to the three main tissues and return the labels for these clusters, as you can see here in this segmentation. A different type of unsupervised machine learning task is dimensionality reduction. And the aim of dimensionality reduction is to reduce number of features while preserving important characteristics of the data. For example, we will use Wisconsin breast cancer dataset. This is a dataset of digitized images of breast cells obtained through biopsy. And some of these images contain healthy cells and some others contain malignant cells. And what the researchers have done, they measured different properties of these cells, such as diameter, concavity, area, texture, and they made 30 measurements like that. And if you want to explore the structure of this data set, it's very difficult to do with 30 features. So what we can do dimensionality reduction to only 2 features and then display these 2 features. And these 2 features that we found are called principal components. And you can see principal component 1 and 2 on X and Y axis, and now we are able to display structure of the data set. So note that for dimensionality reduction, the outputs are the transform features and not labels or target values. So dimensionality reduction is actually a type of feature transformation. Here is the list of unsupervised machine learning methods covered in this module. You are already familiar with k-means clustering, and we will add Gaussian mixture model and spectral clustering. For dimensionality reduction, we will cover principal component analysis, independent component analysis, Laplacian eigenmap, and autoencoder. Autoencoder is a type of neural network. So you can see that neural networks are capable of implementing different machine learning tasks. Now that the basic machine learning concepts are hopefully clear, let's formalize them using a mathematical notation. So we already know that each sample is characterized by one or more features, and we can group them into a d-dimensional feature vector that we denote X. And because it's a vector, it's denoted in bold. Now, the machine learning tasks is to learn a model f, and the f can be represented as a function of the feature vector x. And this function returns predicted outputs that we denote y hat. And of course, for supervised tasks, the samples also have expected outputs that we denote by y. So let's say that we have n training samples and we denote them with bold x, with an index that goes from 1 to n and number of samples. And then all the features for all the samples can be represented by a data matrix, capital bold X, and this matrix has a size n times d. So here is the matrix, and you can see that the rows of this matrix are formed by the d-dimensional feature vectors. So the rows actually correspond to different samples. So that's why we have n row, which is the number of samples, and columns correspond to different features. That's why we have d columns. And finally, in supervised tasks, the expected outputs from form an output vector of dimension n, and we will denote it with bold y. So in summary, a machine learning task is supervised if it's trained by both features and outputs. And in regression, the outputs are continuous, and in classification, they are discrete. And the machine learning task is unsupervised if it's trained by features only. And clustering is type of unsupervised task where similar features are grouped into clusters. And dimensionality reduction is a task where a number of features are reduced while preserving characteristics of the data. So now is time to test your knowledge on kids. We will do that using a quiz, which is called What is Machine Learning? It should take you about 5 to 10 minutes. And after you are done with the quiz, please watch the second part, which is called Starting with Scikit-learn. And in this part, we will focus on supervised learning.